Hi, I'm Bud Reynolds at the Reynolds Law Firm, and I wanted to take a moment to give you a brief introduction to our video blog for the month of July 2019. This month I chose to focus on your mental well-being, and I'm going to interview very briefly a short clip from a therapist and life coach by the name of Brian Vigneri. I've known Brian for a number of years and have found him always insightful and lots of applicable wisdom. In fact, over one of our coffees, I stole from him, with his permission, the use of his concept of the 4 pillars, and I've modified that for our legal setting. And if you are working or plan on working with our firm, you're going to come to learn that we think a little differently than some other attorneys. We recognize that the legal services that you need are extremely important, and we do our best to deliver those to you. But additionally, we also recognize that in this moment, you're at a proverbial crossroads. You may even be in crisis, and there's a lot of other factors beyond the legal issues that you're struggling with. And we need to recognize those, and we may need to pull in other resources that can provide us some great guidance and assistance in that regard. So this month we're focusing again on mental health, and in the upcoming months we're going to focus on the other pillars. But real quick, those pillars are your legal needs, which are in the center. On top I have your physical needs. We talked about that a little bit last month, about my own journey with trying to get healthier and trying to eat better and using healthy meals, a food delivery service for that purpose. We'll talk about financial needs here on the left. And those financial needs, we'll bring in some financial planners to talk to you at that point, because that's an important part of the divorce process or family law process that you're going through. This month, in July, we're focusing on the emotional and spiritual needs. And another month, we'll focus on the mental or intellectual needs and what it means to grow. And what I've learned over the 20 plus years I've been doing this is, while the legal outcome is important, the secret sauce really is you and how you navigate this situation, what you're willing to do to invest in yourself, to invest in your future, and to grow. Not only to the extent that we can aid you in that process, but through other endeavors with other professionals or on your own. And so again, as always, I'm here to help you however I can. And if that's with legal needs, great. If that's having a coffee or a conversation, great. If that is you looking at my LinkedIn profile and seeing that I'm connected with someone that could be of assistance to you, then by all means, reach out to me. I'm happy to help however. And without further ado, let's listen to Brian Vigneri. Have a good day. All right, today we're talking to Brian Vigneri. He's a therapist here in the Johnson County, Kansas area. I've known Brian for a handful of years and found him to be an exceptionally wise individual with good information. So I wanted to talk with him a little bit today and bring some of his wisdom and insight to your attention. So with that, I'll let Brian just do a short introduction of himself.
Awesome. Well, as you said, Brian Vigneri is my name. I've been around the area for many years. The Johnson County area. I actually started working with people almost 20 years ago in this format. Private practice is about 15, but an emphasis on families, with the extended family or the marriage or the kids. That's my passion, is to help people hopefully get to a place where they're more effective and where their family is more connected as family should be. And obviously in the reality of our world, that's not always the case. But ultimately that's my plan, is to help push them in a direction of mission and vision for this family unit, and foster connection.
Brian, we've had a few coffees together, and one time when we were having one, you talked to me about the 4 pillars that you talk with your patients about, or in your workshops, what you speak about. And I told you I love that because it synthesized what I try to talk with my clients about during their cases, but it's succinctly stated what I was not able to artfully articulate. So will you briefly address those 4 pillars for us today?
Absolutely. So I, first of all, lead my life in these 4 areas that you're talking about: mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. I call them the four pillars, and if you want to throw a fifth, I'll call it the spare tire of the car, is financially. But mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual are the four areas that in order to be effective in our life, we've got to take a serious look at all four. We're never going to be balanced with them, I don't believe. The reality is when we take a look at one and we start growing in one area, the other three have a tendency to be challenged and give us an opportunity to grow them. So obviously in the counseling world, I spend most time with the mental and the emotional piece of it. 9 times out of 10, I find people when they step in and they start to grow mentally or emotionally, that all of a sudden, well, here comes some spiritual growth and here comes some physical growth from a standpoint of taking care of self more, because I believe we've been created with all four of these areas of our life. When we step in and we really take an effective look at each one of those areas, we're going to naturally grow and naturally become more whole as an individual. And I believe when the individual does that, well, then relationship comes together, business comes together, kid relationships, our children get closer to us. It just benefits all the relationships in our life.
Very good. Now, often when you and I first meet our clients, they're in a crisis moment. And, Band-Aids are being applied to wounds that maybe need stitches, as a metaphor here. Over your years of providing counseling and coaching services to individuals, for your clientele, if you could think about the ones that were going through a family law related matter, whether that was a divorce or a custody case, from your standpoint and your perception, what difference did you see in how those people navigated those challenges, if they were living into those four pillars versus not living into those four pillars?
Yeah, well, the reality is when you're right, there's a crisis that's going on. And what I find is in crisis, our IQ has a tendency to drop from a standpoint of just the sense of urgency. I think our culture really has too much of a sense of urgency. Everything's got to be finalized now, and it's got to be done now. And I find that people who have looked at those four areas of their life and have really sewn into them and really grown, that they will allow themselves some more space and some more time to be able to get those rational thoughts. Because let's face it, in the midst of any family crisis or in the midst of a divorce or a pending divorce, there's a whole lot of things that pop up, and there's a ton of drama that can happen with these sort of cases. So if they'll take a look into those four areas, I really believe that will, even if the end result is, from my standpoint, undesirable, where they end up not together in a marriage, they're going to be better off individually if they've taken that time and really taken a look at those four areas. So ultimately, the more effective that they've done with those four areas, the more effective the outcome or the result, and the less drama that goes through the process.
In terms of over the years, you've seen tons of patients, read a lot, live life. So there's a lot as we age and mature that we are able to reflect back on and have these epiphanies, if you will, or these aha moments. For anyone that is potentially considering that they may need a divorce, or that they are in fact in the middle of a divorce case, what is one piece of advice that you may give to one of those divorcing spouses, or a piece of wisdom that you think could make impact in their life?
That is something that's been on my radar screen a lot recently, and it goes back to the time component. Who's generating or who's driving the sense of urgency? I think so often in our fast-paced world, we can get so wrapped up in things have to be done now. I find that if couples, there's a reason that couples came together in the beginning. There's a reason that they made this covenant or this commitment to each other in marriage. If they will get out of their own way, take a pause, take some time, and allow themselves to heal and allow themselves to grow through the process, I believe that they'll become better off for it. So time is definitely something that it wasn't something that I really incorporated a lot when I was younger in my practice. But anymore, I'll say, hey, what's the difference between if this is done in a month, if this is done in 6 months, or this is done in a year? If putting this thing off a year can save a marriage and really bring a family tie back together, well, then you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your family to just take that time.
Do you have a favorite quote that you like to use in your practice with clientele?
One that I use a lot is when I learn to accept rather than expect, I'll have fewer disappointments. That's something that has impacted me for years. I read that probably 21, 22 years ago. That's something that I continue to pass on. Just within the last 48 hours, I passed that on to somebody and they said, wow, that's given me a different perspective. So when I learn to accept rather than expect, I'll have fewer disappointments.
Lastly, for individuals that may be considering working with you, Brian, can you just say what do you think differentiates you from other therapists? In other words, what's your superpower?
Well, I really, from a standpoint of family, I really like to grow the individual before I try to grow the marriage or before I try to grow the family, because the reality is I'm the only me that I can control. And when people get that into their mind where they're in charge of their own growth, that's the only way that relationship's going to come together. So if it's a superpower, it comes from my own faith, from a standpoint of helping the individual grow, so therefore they can be better off for those that are close to them and those that they're around.
I like that, and that kind of ties back into that leadership I talked about, which reminds me of another quote I love, which is, people don't change because they're told they should. They change when they realize they must.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
So if that individual grows, then they have more leadership within the family unit that they're exhibiting. They then have more of a moral authority, if you will, to maybe speak about that the family needs to grow,
right? Because
they've taken the time and energy to invest in themselves.
Right. Right.
It's hard to look at the person in the mirror a lot of times.
Absolutely.
So, all right, Brian, I appreciate your time today. And real quick, what is the easiest way for someone to get a hold of you if they're interested in talking with you more?
Easiest way is digitally. My website is vigneri.com, VIGNERY.com. That's the simplest way to get a hold of me. I'm on social media and other places like that. So
great.
I have a unique name. I'm easy to find.
All right. Awesome. Thanks.